Thien Pham, who will be in conversation.
Hi everybody, thank you for coming today. This is my hometown, so I'm very excited to be here. Yeah, you can take it away.
All right, well,
actually, it's both our hometowns. Gene is also from San Jose.
I am also from San Jose. Thank you so much for being here. It's awesome to see such a great crowd. Thien and I have been friends for a long time, long enough where it actually feels very awkward for me to compliment him. But I do have to say that even if we were not friends, I would think that Family Style is a remarkable book. It sort of blends tragedy and humor in a way that I think is very, very unique. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a short half-hour conversation about the book and about Thien's life and about how those two things merge. And then if you all have any questions, I'm sure that Thien would be happy to answer them. So, Family Style, we're going to get to the origin of Family Style, but I want to start with the origin of Thien Pham.
Oh.
You grew up in San Jose.
San Jose!
But you were not born in San Jose.
I was not born in San Jose.
Okay, so I want you to talk about the difference that the city has made in your life and what it was like to come here. Like, do you remember coming here?
Yeah, I mean, one of the fun stories that's in the book that I think is like really special is that when we came to America, me and my parents, we arrived in the San Francisco airport, and our uncle, who is Caucasian, when he picked us up, he told me this later. I had an interview with him, and I asked him like what he thought when he picked us up from the airport, and he was like, one of the main things that he thought was that back then, coming from San Francisco, even now, coming from San Francisco, there's only two ways you can go. You can go 101, or you can take the 280, right? And he was telling me the story about how like he wanted to remind himself that he needed to take the 280 because he, and even though it was longer, he was like, I got to take them home during the 280 because I want them to love San Jose. And 280 was way more beautiful a road. I don't know because it's way more beautiful to drive to San Jose on a 280 than 101. And that struck me because, it was so nice of him to even think about that because we just came from a refugee camp. Like anything, like you can take us to the worst part of San Jose and we'd still be like, this is amazing. So like it was really heartwarming to me that he thought of that. But San Jose has pretty much defined who I am as a person. Because, I, for such a long time, I had a real struggle with people talking about how, there's not that many people of color places. And you were just like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Even if we looked at this crowd here, or if we looked at the school that I went to, my group at Westmont High, my group of friends at Westmont High, like my friend Ryan and who's late.
But he's not cheating.
Yeah. But we were all just such a diverse group of people that it really, and I grew up like this, so just knowing that, and then when you go places and you don't see the diversity that we have in San Jose and in Silicon Valley. We even have more now than back then, and it was still such a great place to grow up. And that's part of the reason why people always ask me if I ever felt like I was there was any racism, and I was like, I never really felt that. There's a couple of times in the book, but really I've never really felt that racism, and that's because I was protected in this beautiful city,
Yeah, I think San Jose has a really deep history to it, and some of it is actually in this store.
Yes.
I don't know if any of you have been to Hicklebees before. I'm sure a lot of you have, but if you haven't, after the signing, look around the store. You'll see artifacts and signatures and autographs of really, really prominent figures in American children's literature. It's really amazing. Now bookstores in general, I think, have played a pretty big role in our lives.
Yeah.
Right? Moving on from your origins as as a San Josean, is that how you say
San
it?
Josean.
To your origins as a cartoonist, what can you tell us about how you became interested in comics?
Well, we had a 7-Eleven by our house, and I remember we had it was after the lycée, so me and my brother finally had some money, and we went to 7-Eleven. And the thing that me and my brother, who's back there by the way, say hi to everybody. We would go to 7-Eleven and buy those balsa wood airplanes. Do you guys remember that? Or candy. And that one time we went, and instead of buying that, I saw this comic, and anybody who loves comic books out there, we all remember the first comic that we ever bought, and ours was a Marvel team up with Spider-Man and Moon Knight. And as soon as I read that book, I realized that I love comics. Because I was never a good reader. I'm still not really that great a reader. But when I read the comic, it got me to understand the words better because of the juxtaposition of the words in the pictures. And then, luckily enough, a few years after my passion started, my parents they opened a bakery. It's also but that bakery happens to be right next to a comic book store in the same mall, and that comic store is called Red Planet Comics.
Do you remember the name of the mall?
Yeah, El Paseo. I mean, it's in the book.
El Paseo.
Yeah, it's in the book, bro.
Do y'all remember El Paseo?
Do you guys remember El Paseo? You don't remember the way we remember, with all the fountains, and it was awesome.
And the glass elevator.
Yeah, glass elevator in the middle.
Yep.
Heald College.
Yep.
Heald College owned a lot of the El Paseo Mall. But Gene and I actually went to the same comic book store, but we never ran into each other. We probably did.
We just didn't know each other. Yeah.
But later on, we're like, I went to Red Planet. He's like, I went to Red Planet Comics. It's like, do you know that the crazy guy that owned it? It's like, yeah, that guy was crazy. Yeah. Now, if any of you guys know what happened to the guy that runs Red Planet Comic, his name was Dean.
I mean, we don't know his last name.
We don't know his last name. So we'd love to know if you guys know who Dean is. But ever since then, I fell in love with the medium of comics and always wanted to draw comics. I've always wanted to draw comics since I was a kid. And my brother knows this. We drew comics together, and we've always just loved comics. Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to be besides a cartoonist when you were little?
Not really.
Cartoonist was it.
Yeah, all I wanted to do was draw.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember, it was just like all I wanted to do was draw. That was my whole thing. Yeah.
Okay. So eventually, though, you didn't go from being a kid to being a professional cartoonist. You went from being a kid to being a teacher. Okay. So why don't you talk about your career as a teacher? Like, how long have you been teaching? Where do you teach? What do you teach?
So, Gene is a very important figure in my life. I hate to say it, and I hate to tell people how important he is to me. But Gene is responsible for a lot of the things that happen to me in my life, good and bad. But one of the things is that Gene got me the job at Bishop O'Dowd High School. When I graduated art school, I was living with my parents because I don't know if you guys know this, but that's what you do after you graduate art school. Is you go and I was basically just working at my aunt's liquor store and living with my parents. And I met Gene and we were drawing comics together. And this was back up in Oakland with this crew of cartoonists. It was Gene Yang, Jason Shiga, Lark Pien, Derek Kirk Kim, and I'll even name the non-Asians. Jesse Ham and Jason Thompson.
Ben Catmull.
Yeah, Ben Catmull. And one day, Gene just says, Gene doesn't like me. Gene still hates me when we first meet. And then he's like, I guess if you need a job, my high school is hiring. And I said, okay, I guess. And then I got the job, and I told Gene, I remember telling him, I said, I'm only doing this teaching until my art career takes off. once I'm famous, I'm out of here. This is just, like, just to get out of my mom's house. Nothing wrong with that, Mom. I love the house, all right? But after the first year of teaching, though, I, like, really fell in love with that career. It was, like, right away, I was like, this is the place for me. Like, all my life, all I wanted to do was drawing comics. And then when I got my first job, I was like, I love this job. And it's something about just being with students and being with this community of people that all kind of cared about each other and all really invested in each other's success, whether it be teachers or students. I really loved it. And I got to work with my best friend, who still doesn't think he's my best friend, but he is my best friend. Every day, and we got to, like, I remember I was just telling somebody the other day, like, it was so fun to be like, we would teach a class and we'd have a period off together and we'd just sit around and talk about comics and draw comics. And it was just such a fun time. Yeah, and I love that job. And I've been at this job for 22 years now. So back since I started in 2002. And I will always do that job. I mean, that's my career. I mean, even if my art career takes off and I'm famous, I think I'm still gonna stick to teaching because I love it that much. Yeah.
Now, just to be clear, I didn't hate you. I just didn't, like, trust that you would be a good teacher before I got to know you. It took me a long time. I think it took me about a year of getting to know you before I was like, oh, I could see this guy working with teenagers.
But not also at that time, it was so easy to be a teacher. Like, I just walked in there with an art degree, and they were like, cool, teach these little kids, Like, nowadays, you got, like, teaching credentials, you got, like, background checks. I like a knife.
Now, just to be clear, you did eventually get a teaching credential.
I did eventually.
And they did eventually perform a background check on you.
Yeah. It was fast.
Okay, so we've covered the origin of Thien Pham as an American, as somebody who lives in San Jose, the origin of Thien Pham as a cartoonist and a teacher. Let's talk about the origin of Family Style.
Oh, okay.
So you and I have been friends for over 2 decades now.
Uh-huh.
For almost the entire time, you have talked about this book.
No, you have talked
No.
about it.
You have talked. Why would I talk? How would
Because
I
you
know?
were like, I remember I told you the story of my family coming to America and the pirates, and you're like, you gotta make that a graphic novel, bro. Bro, that would sell so much, bro. That's what you said. You were like, bro, that would sell so much. Then I was like, okay, I'll try. And every time I tried to do this graphic novel, it wouldn't work out. Like, I just couldn't get it quite right. I didn't really know how to tell it. And then, I don't know if you guys have seen this book called The Best We Could Do. This book came out. This book came out, and I read it, and then I was like, well, I guess I can't write this story anymore, right? Because this book is an amazing book about a family coming to America as well. I was like, I don't have a voice that is going to be significantly different than this. Until
Wait. It's not just that book. It's also Thien in America. It's also an awesome book.
Yeah.
About the same thing.
Yeah. But they don't have it here.
And Sympathizer.
He's trying to make me look like a jerk. They didn't have it here. We had it. I would show it. But anyways, so then it wasn't until I talked to my parents over the quarantine. I stopped in and talked like a good son, unlike my brother who lived in San Jose, but didn't really stop by to talk to my mom very often. I stopped to talk to them every week. Every Saturday I came and we sat and talked, and I finally asked my parents about our trip. And they told me the story, and as they were telling me, like, I kind of knew, but I didn't really know. And when they told me the story, I was like really taken aback. I was like really like moved by a lot of like their sacrifices and all that. And then they asked me like what I remembered. And then when I was telling them what I remembered, I realized that everything I remembered had been tied to food. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that time I had that potato chip. Oh, I remember that time I had the rice ball. And then I realized that was like that was my in. You know, this was how I was gonna tell my story, and that was gonna be different than the best we could do or anything else. And then that's when everything kind of snapped and got together, and that's the only way I was able to like go over the hump of not being able to figure out how to do this fun. Yeah. And were you happy when I told you I was gonna do that?
I didn't believe you. I didn't really believe you because you taught. I feel like you said that multiple times over the last 20 years. Now, the best we could do. This is a brilliantly illustrated graphic novel. It
but you know what
tells a very, very heartfelt story. Right? It tells a very heartful story, and yours is different. Yours is different. But I would say one of the key differences is actually like humor.
Oh.
Now, you would never call this book funny,
no,
right?
No.
You never call this book funny. But your book is actually funny, even though it deals with some really, really tragic and difficult things. So, how did you manage that? If we were not friends, it was easy for me to compliment you. That's what I would say. I would say that the way you insert humor into a difficult narrative is actually really remarkable and deft. Like it's very deft.
You say remarkable and deft?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
No. I would have said that if we were friends. If we didn't know each other, I was just reviewing it. So how did you do that? Do you feel like that was something you had to put thought into, or did it just come out naturally like that?
Well, I always wanted to tell, because we had fun, you know, and I asked my dad, I said, Dad, I remember asking him, and you guys can tell him, ask him later, but I asked him about the refugee camp, and I was like, must have been so hard and so sad. How did you get through that? And my dad was like, it wasn't like that at all. He said it was a lot of fun. He said the refugee camp was full of joy and full of like happiness, and they just had a lot of fun, and I remember that kind of too, like running around this refugee camp, like playing all dumb games and stuff like that. And so I didn't want to make this book sad because our life wasn't sad. You know, like it was hard. There was a lot of hardships and there was a lot of stuff that we went through, but ultimately we were very fortunate, and it was a great life. Like my life is a great life, and the life that I have now, all coming from my parents' sacrifice and the things that we went through, is great. And I wanted to celebrate that as opposed to kind of telling a woe is me type of story, you know? And so I did. I mean, I always try to put humor in all the things I do, and a lot of times it doesn't work out. So I'm so happy to hear you say that it was so good, Gene.
It was honestly really well done. It was very well done. Now, are there any incidents from your childhood or your family's history that did not make it into the book?
Oh, there's so many incidents that didn't make it into the book, but that's what the sequel is for.
The other thing I have to ask about is
someone just bought that. We just sold a book. Let me text T real quick. T, you just sold a book.
So the other thing that's remarkable about the book, in my opinion, is that you're writing about real people that you still have a relationship with, right?
Yeah,
and I've never done a full-on autobiography because I'm a little bit freaked out about how doing a book like that would affect my actual relationships with these actual people in my actual life. So were you ever freaked out about that?
I was not, because my family's awesome! I was not freaked out because I knew that I wasn't going to write anything bad about them. But the sequel, I'm a little freaked out. Because I'm about to write some bad stuff. No, yeah, I was never freaked out about that. I was more freaked out by the high school one. In the book, I have a high school chapter, and I definitely was constantly texting my friends and sending them pages just to make sure that they were okay with the accuracy. My Vietnamese sometimes accuracy. Still can't say that word. The accuracy of it, and like whether they were okay with me writing or saying a few these things. I have a joke in there about how my friend Vin was not very Vietnamese, and I definitely had to like say, hey bro, is it okay if I write this? But that was more than but I can't imagine. There's so many people that write stories that are very honest, like so honest, where they're like brutally honest about their their feelings about their families and stuff. And there's no way I'm ever going to do that. that just seems too much.
But the book is still honest.
It is honest.
It's still honest.
Just
Okay.
honest in a happy life.
Okay, but you're being honest about the happy parts.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
I see. Did any of your high school friends push back on anything?
No, not at all. I remember, my friend Linda's not here. She lives in Monterey, but I remember telling her and a couple other of our friends, at one of the big revelation. I was like, Linda, I'm gonna read this book, and I'm gonna in that book I'm gonna tell everybody that I had a crush on you, right? Because all through high school, I never really told her that, you know. And I was like, it's a huge secret I've held all my life. And of course, all of the people that were there were like, oh, we know, bro. like you thought you were holding it a secret in some way. I'm like, yeah, I thought like, no, bro, like, everyone knows. So then that was like the only thing that I was like worried about. But other than that, no, they pushed back.
Okay. So let's move to how you put the book together. Like, what's your process? Did you write a script first? Did you start with sketches?
I'm not a good writer, you guys, and I'm just like an okay artist, but I'm a really great comic book artist. So I just started drawing, and one of the neat things about this book was that it was never really meant to be a book. It was meant to be Instagram posts. So when I was drawing it, I was just doing it one panel at a time, 6 panels per page, and I was basically just drawing it that way, never thinking that it was going to be a cohesive book. It was like one of those things where I talked to my parents and I got really inspired and felt like I had to do it, and I felt like I couldn't wait for like a publisher to read it and agents and all this stuff. I felt like when I just needed to get it out. So I just threw it up on Instagram just for people to read. And it was just through happy circumstances that it got published. But I didn't write at all. I didn't thumbnail at all. I just drew it. And so I would go home, I would just draw it, and it just kind of came together. And like every panel would be informed by the panel previous to it, and every page would be informed by the page before it. So I didn't really have a plan. There was no like page count. There was no like every story. I wouldn't know if I was gonna do that story next or anything like that. It was like really on the fly.
So it's just
very different from how you write.
Yeah. It's just a series of Instagram posts.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
so moving from a series of Instagram posts, which are still up.
Yeah.
They're still up.
Yeah, they're still up.
Okay, moving from a series of Instagram posts to a published book, were there any changes that you had to make?
Yes, they wanted the one thing that the biggest change is that the high school chapter wasn't going to be there, but they wanted a high school chapter because they were like, we got to sell this to young adults, and young adults don't want to see kids and they don't want to see adults. So what they want to see is high school kids, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna put this chapter, and it was the hardest chapter to write because it was the chapter that made me feel like in high school I was telling a bunch of people this the other day, but I feel like in high school I was a really terrible person. Like, I just didn't think that I was. There was a bunch of things about me that I think like if I had to go back to high school, I would definitely be like, young Thien, you gotta shape up, bro. Like that, a lot of those things, and to like have to go back to your high school life and face that again was a little tough. But they wanted it, and I did it. I think it, and because they're book people, it worked out. Like it was like if this book would be way weaker without this chapter, and so I'm glad I did what they did.
So you agree with the note?
Yeah,
for
sure.
How do you make your art? Is it physical? Is it digital?
I used to draw on pen and paper and scan it in like we normally do, but now it's all on an iPad. So I draw everything on this program called Procreate with an iPad, and honestly, that's the only reason that this book was made, because it makes it's so much easier and so much faster. If you guys have ever used this program called Procreate, it is an amazing program, and it's so deep, and it's so I think I bought it for $7. It's like the best bargain of all times, and yeah, and I know that a lot of people are doing it now. And I've been trying to get
I'm on it. I'm on it now. Yeah, I'm on it. Yeah,
but before there are a lot of us that were like, nope, pen and paper, and it's still great. But in terms of like what we do, I think that is the best thing. Yeah.
Okay, so did any of you follow Thien on Instagram?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know that for the past several months, he's been eating noodles every day to promote this book. So my final question before we open up to the audience is, have you noticed any adverse health effects from eating noodles every day?
Bro, I eat the noodles anyways. The only thing that was like, now I have more time to sit and actually eat my noodles, because before I would be like recording and like everybody be like if you walked into like a fancy restaurant and you start recording yourself eating, they'll be like, oh, that's just an Instagram or whatever. You walk into like a mom and pop like Vietnamese hole-in-the-wall restaurant, and then you start recording, and everybody's just like, that guy's a weirdo, right? Because no one's doing that at those places. And the only reason I did it was because of Jin Yang. Like, I posted one, and I thought it'd be funny because I would eat noodles once a week before my book comes out. And then our friend Derek Kirk Kim, you guys all know Derek? He's also a cartoonist, and he's really great. But the thing about Derek Kirk Kim that sucks is that he thinks he's Jin Yang's best friend. I'm Jin Yang's best friend. So we have this rivalry where we'll never like each other, even though we respect each other's work, we'll never really like each other. So on Instagram, it's a week, bro? Why not do a whole day, like every day? And I was like, Derek Kirk Kim, I can't back down to Derek Kirk Kim, I'm Jin Yang's best friend. So of course, I said, okay, I can do that every day. And so then I looked at the calendar, and my friend Brianna was like, bro, that's 95 days. I was like, 95 days. So I did it for 95 days. But I had noodles yesterday. Sometimes I eat noodles 3 times a day. And I just decide, which one am I going to Instagram, you know? I love noodles. I eat it all the time. But it's that I have a time to not eat noodles now. Which is great.
I see.
You have a question?
Questions for Gene. Gene Yang's best friend.
Yeah, who's best friend, Jin Yang?
This is what I have to say. It's my wife. Teresa. But Thien is one of my best friends. Thien is definitely one of my best friends.
I made a shirt that says we're best friends.
There's one more person on that shirt.
All right.
Okay, so are there any questions that Thien can answer for any of you?